The news flew fast across the U.S. troops, like a raging fire in the summer of 1944. The Germans had a new giant tank, 70 tons of steel and raw power, metal so heavy that normal U.S. shots bounced off. Its main cannon was so mighty it could wreck any machine the Allies used from more than a mile away. The Allied spy groups named it the King Tiger. German drivers called it unbeatable. American tank soldiers called it their biggest fear. The first details came from British forces fighting near Caen in Normandy. Before we continue, show your support by subscribing and letting me know where you're watching from. On July 11, 1944, the 53rd Heavy Panzer Regiment sent King Tigers against Allied spots. British tank leaders radioed back notes that sounded unbelievable. Tanks bigger than any they had ever met, shots glancing off the front metal that seemed unbreakable. German tanks firing from distances where British guns could not shoot back well. The mental effect was strong and happened right away. U.S. spy officers gathered facts from many places. The British Second Army gave battle reports. Russian military spies shared details from the Eastern Front where King Tigers had shown up. In August 1944, Free French groups told of seeing huge tanks being moved by train through France. Every message painted the same picture. Germany had put out a new type of armored truck that was better than anything the Allies had. For months, quiet talk had gone around about this metal beast. Reports came back from British groups in Normandy. Russian spies proved it was real on the Eastern Front. Every Allied tank driver knew the numbers well. 180 millimeters of front metal on the top part. An 8.8 semi-periodic cannon with a barrel over 6 meters long. A fighting weight that was heavier than anything on tracks. This was not just another tank. This was Germany's response to the Allies having more machines. A monster built to bring back German power on the battlefield. Allied tank crews looked over details with increasing worry. The technical facts seemed meant to cause panic. The King Tiger weighed 69.8 tons, over twice the weight of a Sherman. Its 8.8 semi-automatic KWK-43 cannon could punch through 150 millimeters of metal from 2,000 meters away. The sloped front metal, 180 thick on the turret and 150 millimeters on the front hull, could beat almost every Allied anti-tank weapon they used. The fear hit right away. American tank crews, who were used to fighting Panzer IVs and even the scary Panthers, now faced something totally different. Briefings painted a dark view. The King Tiger could break through the front metal of a Sherman from distances where shooting back was useless. It would take 4, maybe 5 Shermans to attack the side and wipe out one King Tiger, and many soldiers would be hurt. Sleep was tough for men who knew such a hunter walked the fight. Tank leaders shared tales from British crews who had run into King Tigers. One British officer said he watched his group's shots bounce off a King Tiger's front armor from 800 meters away without causing harm. Another spoke of a King Tiger wrecking 3 Churchill tanks quickly before pulling back without taking much damage. These stories moved through Allied armored groups, building a myth of being unbeatable around Germany's newest gun. The fear made sense. Battle math strongly favored the King Tiger in head-on fights. A Sherman 75 mm gun could not pierce a King Tiger's front metal at any useful fighting distance. Even the better 76 mm gun on later Sherman types struggled against the King Tiger's thick sloped plates. British 17-pounder guns had a better chance, but only from good spots and at shorter distances, where the King Tiger's longer reach gave the German crews the chance to shoot first. In early July 1944, parts of the Best Panzer Division received the first 5 King Tigers given to Normandy. These tanks showed the latest in German armored fighting. Each one cost 321,500 Reichsmarks, the cost of 3 smaller German tanks. Each one took factory time that could have built 2 Panthers. These were not quickly made weapons. These were perfect tools of harm, built by hand with great German skill, meant to show German tech was better at a time when the Reich badly needed a miracle. Giving out these 5 King Tigers had meaning beyond their use in battle. Germany's arms minister Albert Speer had promised more heavy tanks to fight against the Allies having more numbers. The Henschel factory and castle tried to fill orders for hundreds of King Tigers, but making them stayed painfully slow. Skilled workers were hard to find. Allied bombs messed up supply routes. Key materials like tungsten for armor-piercing bullets and molybdenum for metal plates became harder to get. Every finished King Tiger showed German factory strength against increasing trouble. The crews chosen to run these giants were also the best, war-tested soldiers from the Eastern Front, men who had lived through Kursk, who had fought their way out of countless Russian traps. They had been pulled from the bad fighting in the East just to form the core of the 316th Remote Control Panzer Unit attached to the Panzer Division. Their belief was total. They had seen what German metal could do. They had watched Tigers tear through Russian T-34 groups. Now they would show this power to the Americans and British. These veterans brought great knowledge to their new job. They understood tank fighting in a way few Allied crews could match. They knew how to place their tanks for the most benefit. They understood the value of the ground, of clear views, of making kill zones where enemy tanks would be wrecked before getting close enough to shoot back well. Their time in war made them dangerous foes even in worse tanks. In King Tigers, they felt they would be unstoppable. The moment they saw their new machines, these tough veterans felt something change. The King Tiger made everything else look small. Standing 3 meters high, stretching over 10 meters long with its gun weighing 69.8 tons fully loaded, it owned the land. The front metal sloped at angles that would push away shots like rain. The gun, that great 8.8 centimeter KWK-43, promised death to anything stupid enough to enter its view. This was not just a tank. This was a metal fort on tracks, a weapon that would change the way the war went. The crews practiced driving their new machines. They learned the odd parts of the King Tiger's controls. The steering needed more muscle than lighter tanks. The gears needed careful shifting to avoid harm. The fuel use was shocking, burning 190 gallons to go just 120 kilometers on roads. Off-road use was even worse. But these seemed like fair trade-offs for the huge fighting power the King Tiger gave. The commands came in mid-July. The King Tigers would move from their storage spot to the front lines near Tilly and St. Lo. The trip was not long, maybe 80 kilometers through the French country. The crews did their checks before battle with extreme care, as they had been taught. Oil amounts, track tightness, fuel, bullets. Every part was verified, double-checked, approved, ready for the fight. The mechanics gave their okay. The company leader looked over the maintenance books. Everything seemed perfect. These were new tanks, fresh from the Henschel factory, built with the best German engineering. What could go wrong? The first King Tiger started its trip with belief. The Maybach HL230P30 engine started up loudly, all 700 horsepower struggling to move 70 tons of steel. The driver put it in gear, felt the tank move ahead, and began steering toward the front. Behind him, 4 more King Tigers followed, their leaders standing proudly in their turrets, their crews eager to show German power. Then, barely 10 kilometers into the trip, the first problem happened. The lead tank's gearbox started making sounds that no mechanic wants to hear, grinding metal on metal. The driver tried to fix it, shifting gently, slowing down. It made no difference. The gearbox, already pushed too far by the tank's extreme weight, was failing. Within minutes, the King Tiger stopped on a small French road, blocking the whole line behind it. The crew got out in shock. This could not be real, not now, not to Germany's most modern tank. The commander ordered quick fixes, but the mechanics quickly gave terrible news. The gearbox was ruined forever. The inside parts had broken off, The tank would need to be pulled back to a repair shop for a full gearbox swap. Moving it would need another King Tiger or a huge tow truck. Neither was available right away. The Maybach OV-1216B gearbox put into the King Tiger was mostly the same design used in the 45-ton Panther. German engineers had not made the gearbox parts much stronger to handle the extra 25 tons of weight. Under the stress of moving 70 tons, gear teeth broke, bearings failed, and synchronizers wore out fast. This first problem was not a simple factory mistake. It was a basic, lasting fault in its making. 1 down, 4 left. The line got back together and went on. Surely this was just a single problem, a factory mistake, bad luck. The war could not be won by sitting still. The front lines were calling. U.S. and British forces were moving ahead slowly. Every hour mattered. The remaining 4 King Tigers pushed on. Their leaders were now a bit less sure, but still fixed on reaching the fight. 15 kilometers further, the second King Tiger started having engine problems. The Maybach engine, good enough for the 45-ton Panther tank, was badly underpowered for 70 tons. The power-to-weight ratio was just 10 horsepower per ton, much lower than what the tank needed to run all the time. As the King Tiger climbed a small hill, the engine heat started going up. The cooling system, already weak in its design, could not deal with the extreme heat made by an engine running at full power just to keep a basic speed. The driver watched his heat gauges climb into the red area. He told his commander about the issue. They slowed down, hoping the engine would cool. It didn't matter. The liquid was boiling. Steam began coming out of the engine area. Within minutes, the hot engine stopped, the parts inside swelling until they could no longer move. The tank rolled to a stop, smoke rising from the engine cover. German engineers had seen the lack of power early in the plan. The Maybach HL230P30 made 700 horsepower, the same as the engine in the much lighter Panther. Plans existed for a better Maybach 234 fuel injection engine making 800 horsepower, but production delays meant most King Tigers received the poor HL230. The result was expected. Long runs at high power made too much heat, overwhelming the cooling system and causing many mechanical breakdowns. 2 down, 3 left. Now the pattern was getting clear and fear began to enter the minds of the remaining crews. These were not single problems. These were faults with the whole system. The King Tiger, for all its great metal and shooting power, had a deadly weakness. It was too heavy for its own moving parts. The engine, gearbox, and cooling system were all working beyond what they were built for. What looked unbeatable on the test ground became a danger when fighting began. The third tank went another 20 kilometers before its final drive broke. The huge gears that connected the gearbox to the tracks simply could not handle the force needed to move 70 tons across different ground. The teeth broke off. The moving parts stopped. The tank stopped moving. Its crew looked at each other in growing horror. The final drive problem would trouble King Tigers throughout their use. A report from Heavy Panzer Battalion 506 in September 1944 detailed the problem. 12 final drive parts broke after only 50 to 100 kilometers of driving. Track gear teeth snapped under load. Track tension devices broke often. The battalion leader asked for a quick meeting with arms officials to talk about the huge rate of failures. 3 down, 2 left. By now the company leader was facing a hopeless situation. Of 5 King Tigers that had started that morning, only 2 were still working, and they hadn't even reached the front lines yet. They hadn't fired a shot. They hadn't faced a single enemy tank. They had simply tried to drive 80 kilometers on roads, and 60% of the force had fallen apart due to bad mechanics. The commander made the only choice he could. He told the remaining 2 tanks to go slowly, taking care of their overworked engines, hoping their gearboxes would stay together just long enough to reach friendly lines. Behind him lay 3 of Germany's most modern tanks, stopped not by enemy fire, but by their own making. The 4th King Tiger failed 30 kilometers from the front. Problems with the suspension. The connected wheel design meant to spread the tank's huge weight was likely to break. A wheel bearing seized, the wheel locked. The track came off the drive gear. The tank stopped hard, leaning slightly to one side, totally stuck. 4 down, 1 left. One single King Tiger from the first 5 actually reached German spots near Tilly, 1 out of 5, a 20% success rate. The crew of that one tank looked back at the trail of broken machines behind them and understood a horrible truth. Germany's giant tank was not great at all. It was over-designed, tested too little, and basically flawed. But the story does not end there. The fate of these 5 King Tigers showed a bigger pattern that would happen again and again. These specific tanks, chassis numbers 28,001 through 28,005, were the very first King Tigers made, built in March 1944 and fitted with early Porsche turrets. They had been given to the 316th Remote-Controlled Panzer Company, a special group with radio-controlled bomb trucks run from Tiger tanks. The group's job was to break through defenses using remote explosive charges. When the unit moved to Normandy in June 1944, the 5 King Tigers stayed at Chateau d'Un, about 200 kilometers from the front. They were thought to be too risky for battle. The unit commander, facing urgent needs, made the smart choice to switch to 9 Sturmgeschütz attack guns instead. These were ready, dependable, and useful right away. The King Tigers sat unused, reminders of wasted goods. By mid-August 1944, as Allied forces drove through France, these 5 left-behind King Tigers became a problem. German forces could not fix them. They did not have the heavy tow gear needed to pull 70-ton trucks. They had no extra parts for the complex moving systems. The choice was made to destroy the tanks instead of letting the Allies grab them. Bombs were set, turrets were blown off their rings, and the bodies were left next to French roads. Within days, U.S. forces moving through the area started finding these abandoned King Tigers. The first crews to see them approached with huge care, expecting an attack, expecting fire from those feared 8.8 centimeter guns. Instead, they found quiet. Empty tanks, tops open, crews long gone. The Germans, unable to tow or fix these monsters, had simply wrecked what they could and left the rest. American tank drivers could not believe what they were seeing. They had been told these machines were unbeatable. They had been warned that meeting a King Tiger meant almost sure death. Yet here they sat, dead, beaten not by U.S. guns, but by German engineering. The first whole King Tiger grabbed by American forces became a goldmine of information. Tech spy teams from First Army arrived with cameras, measuring tools, and cutting gear. Engineers from the weapons department joined them. British officers added their knowledge. The checkup would take days and make reports that went through Allied command. Engineers and tech experts crawled over every part of the newly abandoned truck. They wanted to know everything about this machine. They needed to know what it could do, what its weak spots were, and how to beat it. What they found shocked them deeply. The armor was indeed amazing. 180 mm at the turret front, angled steeply, 150 mm on the front hull, also angled. This was metal that could resist nearly every U.S. and British tank gun in use. Shots that would have pierced a Panther simply bounced off the King Tiger's front plate. From the front, this tank was nearly unbeatable. Test firing against captured metal plates proved that regular 75 mm Sherman rounds could not break through at any distance. Even the better 76 mm rounds struggled against the thick, sloped metal. The gun was just as great. The 8.8 cm Clavier 43 could punch through 5 inches of metal from 2,000 meters away. This was a weapon that shot farther, hit harder, and was better than every Allied tank cannon. In a direct shooting fight at long distance, the King Tiger had every benefit. The gun used 2-part bullets with the shell and powder loaded one after the other. This slowed the rate of fire compared to one-piece bullets, but allowed for much faster shots and greater piercing power. American engineers measured the barrel length at 6.3 meters, over 71 times the size of the bullet. They checked the loading part, the kickback system, and the mount. Everything was built to very high standards. The viewing tools impressed them most. German Zeiss rangefinders and gun sights were known as the best in the world. A King Tiger crew could spot and shoot at targets at distances where Allied tanks could barely see them. But then the engineers started looking at the drive system, and they began to understand. The gearbox was the same basic design used in the Panther, a tank that weighed 25 tons less. The gears were not much stronger, the bearings were not much bigger. German engineers had mostly taken a gearbox made for a mid-sized tank and hoped it would handle the weight of a huge heavy tank. The result was expected. With constant use, the gearbox parts would fail. Engineers found clear proof of this all through the captured truck. Wear marks on gear teeth showed too. Much pressure. Bearing races showed scratches and braking. The rings were worn thin. A U.S. engineer from Detroit who checked the gearbox wrote in his report that no car maker in America would have approved this drive system for a truck of this weight. The design limits were simply too low. The engine issue was even worse. The Maybach HL230P30 made 700 horsepower, good enough for the 45-ton Panther. But in a 70-ton King Tiger, that same engine was struggling badly. The power-to-weight ratio was barely 10 horsepower per ton. By comparison, the American Sherman, at 30 tons with a 400 horsepower engine, reached over 13 horsepower per ton. The King Tiger was actually less able to move than the tank it was meant to beat. American engineers figured out fuel use based on the tank size and reported travel distances. The numbers were shocking. The King Tiger held 860 liters of fuel inside. This gave it about 120 kilometers of road distance in good weather. Off-road distance was much shorter, maybe 80 to 90 kilometers. Fights with lots of moving, speeding up, and high power use could empty the tanks in less than 60 kilometers. For comparison, a Sherman carried 660 liters and could travel 200 kilometers on roads. The King Tiger needed 30% more fuel to go 40% less distance. The supply problems were terrible. A German column with King Tigers would need almost twice the fuel trucks of a similar American group. In 1944, when Germany had big fuel shortages, this drawback was ruinous. The cooling system could not handle constant use. Engineers looked at the radiators, coolant paths, and fan. Everything was made well enough for normal work, but the King Tiger rarely ran normally. The weak engine ran at high power all the time, making too much heat. The radiators could not cool down fast enough. The liquid would boil, pressure would build, seals would break, and the engine would stop. Proof from the Eastern Front supported these findings. Russian forces had captured 2 King Tigers in August 1944 near Sandomierz in Poland. These tanks were taken to the Kubinka testing ground near Moscow for full checks and tests. Russian engineers put the King Tigers through the same tough testing they used on their own trucks. The Russian testing showed how deep the King Tiger's mechanical problems went. During the move to Kubinka, both captured tanks had many breakdowns. The cooling system was not enough for hot weather. Engine heat went over safe limits often. One tank's gearbox broke completely during the trip. The other's right suspension needed full replacement, and full use could not be brought back even with German spare parts grabbed with the tanks. Once at Kubinka, Russian engineers did careful trials. They drove the King Tigers over different kinds of ground, measured fuel use, tested top speed, and checked how reliable they were. The results were terrible. The tank broke down every 10 to 15 kilometers in hot weather. The cooling system failed often when outside heat was over 30 degrees C. The gearbox got too hot because of poor cooling and the hot air outside. Russian engineers tested the King Tiger's metal by firing captured German 88mm guns at it. They found that the King Tiger's own gun could break through the turret of another King Tiger from 400 meters away. While this showed the gun's power, it also proved that the metal, though thick, was not as unbeatable as people said. The quality of the welding was noted as much worse than similar German designs like the Tiger I, despite careful German effort. The final drive, connecting the gearbox to the tracks, was another major weak point that both U.S. and Russian testing proved. The gears had to move huge power to shift 70 tons. Under the stress of fighting moves, turning in place, backing up fast, these parts failed often. Many captured King Tigers showed signs of final drive failure. The problem was so bad that German field leaders gave out warnings telling Tiger crews not to make fast, needless moves that would stress the final drives. American engineers gathered their findings into detailed technical reports. Intelligence Bulletin No. 184, put out by First Army in September 1944, held large amounts of tech data on the King Tiger. The report went through Allied armored groups, giving tank leaders exact facts about German abilities and weaknesses. The finding was amazing. The King Tiger, while strong in a head-on fight, was its own worst enemy. Its too heavy weight made it a terrible thing to fix. Its weak engine slowed its ability to move long distances. Its complex gearbox needed constant care. Its suspension filled with mud, especially in winter when freezing temperatures locked the connected wheels solid. The intelligence check ended by saying a King Tiger placed well in a hiding spot was very dangerous. Its gun and armor gave it big benefits, but a King Tiger attacking, moving across land, going forward for hours or days, would likely break down before meeting the enemy. The longer the advance, the higher the breakdown rate. The harder the ground, the more stress on parts already working too hard. This understanding changed American fighting rules right away. Instead of fearing the King Tiger as an unbeatable hunter, leaders now knew it as a strong but easily broken weapon. The answer was not to fight it head-on. The answer was to force it to move, to go forward, to change position. Every kilometer it traveled increased the chance of mechanical failure. Every hill it climbed stressed its engine. Every turn wore down its gearbox. American forces also learned that King Tigers, because of their weight, could not cross most bridges. They were too heavy for regular military bridge gear. Engineers figured that the King Tiger's ground pressure, even with its wide tracks, was still huge. Bridges rated for 50 tons would not hold a 70-ton tank. Rivers that other German tanks could get across were impossible blocks. This meant King Tiger movements were limited to certain roads, making them easy to predict and open to air attack. The fuel use was shocking compared to Allied trucks. A King Tiger burned 190 gallons to go just 120 kilometers on roads. Off-road, the use was even worse, sometimes double that rate. For comparison, a Sherman could travel over 200 kilometers on similar fuel. This meant King Tigers needed massive supply help, a fuel line Germany simply could not keep up by late 1944. Maybe most telling was the factory bottleneck. Germany built just 492 King Tigers in the whole war. Making them started in January 1944 and went until March 1945. Just one tank in 1943, 379 in 1944, 112 in 1945 before making them stopped. Compare this to the 35,000 Panzerfroes made, or the 6,000 Panthers, or the 50,000 Shermans built by America alone. For the goods used by one King Tiger, Germany could have built 3 Panthers or 5 Panzerfroes. The math of factory warfare was harsh. Allied strategic bombing added greatly to the low numbers. Royal Air Force Bomber Command hit the Henschel factory in Kassel often throughout 1944. Attacks in September and October wrecked tools, stopped assembly lines, and killed skilled workers. Production dropped from over 100 King Tigers per month in summer 1944 to just 30 per month by year's end. Each bombing raid set production back weeks as workers cleared the mess, fixed machines, and got work going again. The heavy SS Panzer Battalion 501 arrived on the Eastern Front in August 1944 with 45 King Tigers. Only 8 were working when they reached the battle area. 37 had broken down while moving. 37 brand new tanks, fresh from the factory, broken before firing a shot. This was not an army getting ready for victory. This was an army watching its most modern weapons fall apart from inside problems. The battalion had loaded onto trains at Paderborn on August 5, 1944. Headed for southeastern Poland, the trip covered about 800 kilometers by rail. Even train transport was tough. King Tigers were too heavy for many railway cars. Special, strong, flat cars were needed. Loading and unloading needed special ramps. The weight balance had to be watched closely to stop the cars from failing. Several King Tigers were damaged while loading when ramps fell under the extreme weight. After getting off the trains near the Vistula River, the battalion tried a 50-kilometer road march to their assigned spots. This short move became a nightmare. Final drive failures happened first. Tanks stopped as drive gears failed under the load. Then gearboxes started failing. Gear parts broke. Bearings seized. Clutches burned out. Within 2 days of starting the road march, 37 of 45 King Tigers were stuck, waiting for repairs. The 8 working King Tigers that did reach the front lines immediately went into a fight against Russian forces trying to expand their hold near Baranov-Sandomiersky. On August 11th and 12th, 1944, these King Tigers met T-3485s in close combat around the town of Uglanov. 3 King Tigers were wrecked in a surprise attack. Russian tanks firing from hidden spots hit the King Tigers from the side where the metal was thinner. Bullet explosions killed most of the crew. This fight led to a change in rules. German tank rules had kept main gun bullets in the turret for easy crew access. The Uglanov losses showed that hits to the turret could cause huge bullet fires. After this battle, King Tigers kept all main gun bullets in the hull racks, reducing the ready shots, but greatly improving crew chances of survival if the turret was pierced. The change cut bullet capacity from 84 rounds to 68 rounds. By March 1945, German records show that King Tigers had a 59% rate of being ready to work. This meant that at any time, nearly half the force was broken down, waiting to be fixed. Facts gathered on March 15, 1945, showed King Tigers at 59% readiness compared to 62% for the Panzer IV and 48% for the Panther. The King Tiger was actually more reliable than the Panther by the war's end, though still much worse than older, simpler designs. This improvement came from tough, learned lessons. Henschel engineers worked closely with field groups to find and fix mechanical issues. Better seals reduced oil leaks, improved gaskets, stopped liquid loss. Stronger drive parts lasted longer under load. A new track design with wider links spread the weight better. Better driver training cut down on mechanical damage. Better repair steps caught problems before they became breakdowns. By early 1945, the King Tiger was a much more dependable truck than the early ones. But by then, Germany lacked the fuel, extra parts, and factory power to keep up even this improved readiness rate. The Battle of the Bulge gave the perfect final test for King Tiger dependability under battle conditions. Kampfgruppe Piper, leading the German attack in December 1944, had about 45 King Tigers from Heavy SS Panzer Battalion 501 tied to the 1st SS Panzer Division. The plan asked for a quick move to grab bridges over the Meuse River, cutting off Allied forces and taking fuel stores to keep the attack going. Kampfgruppe Piper crossed into Belgium on December 16, 1944, moving through the Losheim Gap. The group included about 4,800 soldiers, 600 trucks, and the attached King Tigers. The advance started well. American defenses were spread thin. Resistance was light at first. Piper's columns took the town of Honsfeld and grabbed a U.S. fuel dump, filling their tanks. But mechanical problems started right away. About 12 King Tigers never left the starting area due to mechanical failures before the attack even began. The rest of the tanks went with Piper's move toward Stavelot, where his group captured a bridge over the Amblev River on December 18th. From there the advance went on toward La Glaise, a small Belgian town that would become Piper's final spot. Only 6 King Tigers successfully reached La Glace with Piper. The others had broken down on the way or been left to guard important spots at Stavelot and Trois Ponts. Tank number 213 was one of those 6, led by SS Obersturmführer Helmut Dollinger. Dollinger's first tank had broken down, so he took command of 213, which had been crewed by SS Scharführer Franz Fastner. The King Tigers were placed around La Glace to protect against the sure American counterattack. Tank 213, along with Tank 221, led by SS Unterscharführer Georg Hanusch, took up spots at Weimont Farm on high ground south of La Glace. Their high spot looked over the road from Tréons, giving great fields of fire against approaching American forces. On December 21, 1944, American forces attacked. Task Force Major and Task Force Lovelady of the 3rd Armored Division moved up the valley with about 25 tanks. The King Tigers opened fire from far away, about 2,000 meters. At that distance, the American tank guns could not shoot back well. The King Tigers had a huge benefit, but the Americans kept coming, using the land for cover, moving ahead in short jumps, closing the distance. Return fire got stronger. A U.S. round struck Tank 213's main gun barrel, wrecking it badly so the weapon could not be used. The exact details are still unclear. Some stories say a lucky shot hit the barrel right on. Others suggest the tank was hit many times until the damage made the gun useless. No matter the reason, Tank 213 was knocked out of the fight. Dollinger got a head wound during the fight, likely from metal pieces piercing the crew area. He hid in the cellar of Weimont Farm while his crew tried to fix things. But by then, Kampfgruppe Piper's situation had become hopeless. Cut off from supplies, nearly out of fuel and bullets, surrounded by American forces, Piper had no choices left. On December 23rd, Piper was given permission to pull back, but pulling back in armored trucks was impossible. The King Tigers and other heavy trucks were completely out of fuel. Piper made the only decision possible. The force would retreat on foot, leaving all heavy gear behind. About 800 men escaped the surrounding forces during the night of December 23rd into December 24th, moving across the country to reach German lines near Wanne. 770 survivors finally met up with their main division. Behind them at La Glace, Piper's force left 135 armored trucks, 6 King Tigers, 13 Panthers, 6 Panzer Aues, over 50 half-tracks and other trucks. Wrecking teams tried to destroy the gear, but time was short and American forces were closing in. Many trucks, including Tank 213, were captured mostly whole. After the battle, American recovery teams moved through La Glace, taking away abandoned German gear. Tank 213 proved tough to pull out because of its spot on the narrow farm road. In July 1945, the U.S. Army got ready to tow it away for scrap. Jenny Guignon-Duz, owner of a local cafe, stepped in. She reportedly offered U.S. soldiers a bottle of cognac for the tank. Her reason was to save it. She thought the tank should stay in La Glace as a memory of the village's pain during the war. The Americans agreed. Tank 213 was moved to the village square in front of the church. It stayed there for years, slowly getting worse, until local saving efforts began in 1951. Parts of the damaged gun barrel were replaced using sections from Panther tanks left nearby in 1975. The tank went through a full restoration and repainting. It was then moved to its current spot outside the December 44th Museum, where it remains the only King Tiger still shown on its original battlefield in Europe. Another King Tiger, tank number 332, has an equally well-known history. This tank came from Heavy SS Panzer Battalion 501 and was left near Petit Coeur in Belgium on December 24, 1944. Sergeant Glenn George of the 740th Tank Battalion found the whole tank while on a drive-around. His unit was part of the 82nd Airborne Division, defending the north side of the Bulge. Tank 332 was in surprisingly good shape despite being left behind. The crew had tried to wreck it before leaving, but the American arrival stopped full demolition. The tank was towed away by the 463rd Ordnance Evacuation Company and moved to Spa, Belgium, then shipped through Antwerp to the United States. Tank 332 arrived at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland for a detailed check. American engineers studied it with the same care they had given earlier captures. They measured, photographed, tested, and wrote down every part of the truck. The tank stayed at Aberdeen for about 40 years, shown outside, where weather slowly ruined its condition. In August 1991, Tank 332 was moved to Fort Knox, Kentucky, for display at the Patton Museum of Cavalry and Armor. To make a display that showed the inside, workers cut open the left side of the hull, showing the inner design, bullet storage, and mechanical parts. This let museum visitors see inside a King Tiger, understanding how the crew worked and how the different systems ran. Tank 332 later moved to Fort Benning, Georgia, where it stays in the U.S. Army collection. It is the only whole King Tiger captured by American forces during World War II. The mental blow to German tank crews was terrible. These men had been promised an unbeatable war machine that would bring back German battle power. Instead, they got a mechanical weak point that broke down always, used fuel at crazy rates, and needed special tow gear that rarely existed. The gap between what was promised and what was real took the spirit out of even seasoned crews. For American tank drivers, the change in thinking was striking. In July 1944, just hearing the name King Tiger caused fear. Briefings painted it as nearly unstoppable. Battle reports from British groups called it unbeatable. Every story made it more scary. By December 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, American crews had learned the truth. Yes, the King Tiger was dangerous in a direct fight, but it was also likely to be out of fuel, broken down, or left behind by its crew after a mechanical failure. The unbeatable monster had been shown to be a broken weapon system. American reports after the battle noted that more King Tigers were found abandoned due to mechanical failure or running out of fuel than were actually wrecked by Allied fire. Tank crews reported finding King Tigers next to roads with tracks off, engines stopped, or gearboxes failed. Some had been left with small damage that would have been easily fixed on more dependable trucks. But the King Tiger's complexity made field repairs almost impossible without special gear and trained workers. The questioning of captured German tank crews showed how deep the problem was. Drivers reported that the gearbox needed constant, careful shifting to avoid damage. Any rough move, any sudden stop or speed change risked gearbox failure. Commanders said they could not count on their tanks to finish long trips. Every move needed planning for breakdowns and recovery work. Repairmen said fixing a King Tiger needed special tools, rare parts, and trained technicians. A track thrown off a Sherman could be fixed by the crew in an hour using simple tools. A track thrown off a King Tiger with its connected wheels and complex suspension could take a full day with special gear. The connected wheel design meant that changing an inner wheel needed removing many outer wheels first. In winter, mud and ice froze between the wheels, making fixing things almost impossible in the field. A broken gearbox meant full replacement, a job needing heavy lift gear, and many days of work. The gearbox weighed over half a ton. Taking it out needed special jacks and hoists. Putting in the new one needed exact lining up and careful tuning. Most field repair groups did not have the gear and knowledge to do this work. A King Tiger with a broken gearbox usually had to be pulled to a rear shop, assuming a tow truck big enough to move 70 tons was around. The final lesson came from factory numbers that told the story of how making things decides victory. Germany used the factory goods of 3 mid-sized tanks to build 1 King Tiger. America built 11 Shermans in the same time with similar goods. For every King Tiger Germany put out, America put out 11 Shermans, all of which were more dependable, easier to fix, and actually able to reach the battleground. American factories made tanks at rates Germany could not match. The Chrysler Tank Factory in Detroit, Michigan, built over 18,000 Sherman tanks between 1942 and 1945. A single American factory made more tanks than all German King Tiger production. Ford Motor Company built over 1,000 Sherman tanks per month at their highest rate. General Motors and others added tens of thousands more. This production benefit went beyond simple numbers. American factories could replace losses fast. A destroyed Sherman could be replaced in weeks. A destroyed King Tiger could not be replaced at all in the war's last months, as making them stopped. American supply lines could deliver replacement tanks to front-line groups easily. German supply lines struggled to deliver fuel to the tanks they already had, let alone new ones. The Americans who captured and studied these machines took away lessons that shaped tank building after the war: dependability over raw power, simplicity over being fancy, staying able to run over, having great ability. These ideas guided U.S. armored truck design for decades. The M48, M60, and M1 Abrams all put dependability and ease of repair as main needs. Lessons learned from checking German over-designing. American tank builders knew that the strongest gun was useless if the tank could not get to the fight. The thickest metal gave no safety if the tank broke down before meeting the foe. The most modern tech meant nothing if field mechanics could not fix it. These basic truths, learned from seeing the King Tiger's failures, became the main rules of American military truck design. The King Tiger is still well known today, shown in movies, video games, and culture as the best German tank. That fame is true, but not fully correct. In a direct fight placed well, with enough supplies, the King Tiger was indeed scary. British tank soldier Ken Tout, who fought in Normandy, said meeting a King Tiger was terrifying. The huge size, the thick metal, the strong gun, all worked together to make a weapon that ruled any fight where it could be used well. But that situation was a very small part of the real war. The much more common situation was the one those first 5 tanks went through in July 1944. Long moves, mechanical stress, poor supplies, sure breakdown. Of the 492 King Tigers made, most were lost to mechanical failure, running out of fuel, or being left behind, rather than being wrecked in combat. This was not the weapon that changed the war. This was a weapon that showed Germany's inability to match Allied factory strength. For the American soldiers who found those first left-behind King Tigers in the summer of 1944, the event changed everything. They had been afraid of German tech being better. They had worried that they were outmatched. Then they found the truth. The most modern German tank could not finish an 80-kilometer road trip without a huge mechanical breakdown. The unbeatable giant weapon could not get to the battle under its own power. The answer to Germany's future became clear. A nation that could not build dependable tanks, could not fuel its armies, could not fix its gear, could not win a war of factory grinding against the combined strength of America, Britain, and Russia. The broken King Tigers proved it beyond doubt. Those left-behind tanks served as strong symbols. American factory might and mechanical dependability had beaten German technical complexity. The war would be won not by who had the best tank, but by who had the most tanks that actually worked. That lesson, paid for with lives across many lands, would shape military thinking for ages. The King Tiger's true story was not its short moments of success in battle, but its proof that fancy engineering without dependable running was finally useless. That was the real story of the King Tiger.